It is my pleasure to now introduce Secretary of California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, Stewart Knox. Secretary Knox has more than 28 years of experience in higher education, workforce, and economic development. In his position, he oversees 7 major departments, boards, and panels that serve California workers and employees with the vision of California at an economy that works for all. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Stewart Knox.
Thank you. Glad to be here. These comfy chairs. I feel like I'm at home.
I feel like I'm going to be sitting way back. Okay. Hello.
Hello. This is nice.
Well, thank you for making your trek to Fresno. We had an opportunity to talk a little bit before, and what's interesting, I don't think there's ever been a Secretary of Workforce and Department of Labor that has an experience like you. So could you maybe talk a little bit about your trajectory of how did you, when you're 2 or 5, did you want to be the Secretary of California Department of Labor and Workforce? How did that work?
No, I did not. I don't know I want it now. No, I'm kidding. No, it's good. No, it's a great question. I started in the community college system. And so...
Wait, you started where?
At the community college system, Yuba College up north, far up north. Small district. And so, I started in workforce development as a GED instructor teaching adults that had lost their jobs. And so one of the key components for me was to really think about how we give back to community and also how to get people back to work quickly. And so I did that for about 2-3 years, and then the college picked me up to do one of their adult programs. And while I was doing that, they said, there's this JTPA, if you're old enough to remember, Job Training Partnership Act. Yeah, see, there's a few people old enough to remember, that we want to write for and run the program for the workforce board. I said, sure, I can help write the grant. So I wrote the grant. 3 weeks later, they called me and said, hey, we got the grant, do you want to be the director?
Sounds familiar.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the trajectory, and then later became workforce board director for 4 different areas in the state of California, all the way from LA area all the way back to the far north state, and then was a health and human services agency director, worked for Calvert Community College as an executive there, and then also went to work for Governor Brown, worked for the Brown administration for 4 years. And then when Newsom came in, I thought I was going to exit. I was actually going to go back to probably the community college system, and I thought, well, I'll exit because usually those transitions, we get to exit out. And they called and they said, how would you like to be the Undersecretary of Labor? And so I said, yeah, that sounds amazing. So I was the Undersecretary for a little over 4 years, and then now the Secretary of Labor for the last 7 months. So finish out this administration, and then who knows, I might be back at a community college.
Well, we're always looking for talent. I'm just, it would be great if we could have you join us. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Your experience, I've had an opportunity to meet other people in your roles, and no one ever understood community colleges. And with your knowledge of working at a community college, and I know you even attended a community college, how do you think that shaped maybe your leadership a little bit differently, and how do you think that may change how some of those programs change?
Sure, no, it's a great question. I think for me, attending the community college and then having the opportunity to actually go on to a 4-year university and then be where I'm at today, all started with education and training. And that was also what I saw when I worked teaching GED to adults that had lost their jobs, how meaningful the education component and training is for that individual. And without that education or some documentation of training, how difficult as a caseworker I was, also basically as the GED instructor, for these folks to try to get jobs. If I didn't have any documentation of their work history, how hard that was for us to actually get people employed. And so I think from that perspective, and then working for the community college system is also putting together the pieces. We all know how this works in a community college system. It's like, when I got there, I ran the JTPA, then it was WIA program, but then it was, we have money for independent living program, foster care youth. We have money for CalWorks and Welfare to Work program back in the day. We have money for this, so support services. So for us, it was starting to put together the pieces and see where we could best utilize the resources for the community college system using our federal dollars. So I think from my perspective as the labor secretary is really thinking about the systems and systems alignment. So we have about, I always say it's 10% of our funding. Our funding is fairly large because we also oversee EDD and state disability and workers' comp, things, small programs like that work really well apparently. But regardless, 10% of our funds is workforce, but it's about 80% of our work. And so how do we start to leverage the capacity and the resources that the community college system has of just the sheer size of the college system to better serve the students and our customers as well? And how do we align those resources in a much bigger and grander way? This governor's been amazing. He has put $2 billion in workforce.
Wait, did you say $2 billion?
$2 billion in workforce, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big number. Previous to that, Governor Brown did about $50 million a year of general fund. No, I'm talking general fund. So our funds usually for workforce is about $450 million federal, about $120 million of employment training panel, which is a tax on employers, and the rest of it has been basically just $50 million here, $50 million there. This governor has put in literally $2 billion into workforce systems in addition to our federal and other state resources. So, but I know that's going to end. It's going to end probably with my administration and his administration. How do we leverage the power and the resources of the community college system to make sure that, one, the students and the services that we provide, and we serve about 245,000 customers a year. Ours is a heavy case management system, as most of you know, heavy equity lens, making sure we serve the most in need customers. But how do we do this better with the community college system? And we did it. You know, I think that's the other reality is like I figured it out generally. Could always do things better, of course. But we figured out a lot of really cool examples at the college of how to really work with the students and provide the wraparound services, provide transportation, provided childcare. We even had a food program. USDA, because we were also a rural community, we had a USDA grant where we provided food and healthy food options every Wednesday with our childcare provider with the college. So we also ran the Career Center for the college later. So those are examples of things I'd like to see is how do we embed either our career counselors with some of the community colleges. I still remember the day the president of the college came to me and said, "I want you to run the Career Center." And I said, "Oh, I don't want your Career Center." I'm like, no, we have our Career Center, you have your Career Center, I don't want yours. And he's like, yeah, that's why I want you guys to run our Career Center. I was like, all right. So we went in and did an assessment, and really the assessment of the Career Center, nothing in defense of the Career Centers, but it was understaffed usually. We don't have a lot of money in the community college system for them. And so it was like, oh, let me see, I've got money for that. So we pumped in about, $60,000 a year. It wasn't a lot. And provided 2 counselors full-time at the Career Centers for those CTE courses. We also embedded those folks that would go actually out to those CTA courses, so they would have 1 to 2 semesters left. Those folks all got enrolled into our programs. We provided them wraparound services. We provided them with job placement services at the end and working with industry. Right. So those are just some ideas and thoughts.
There's a lot there. I know recently you were quoted as saying, California community colleges are a vital element in our workforce development system. And as a leading training provider, they equip students with in-demand skills and give them opportunity to thrive in the economy, which, by the way, I love that quote. But I know our faculty out here, because we have a lot of career technical faculty out here, but we also have a lot of general education faculty. And so, I know that we talked last night a little bit about the power of a post-secondary education leading to healthier and happy lives. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the role of the faculty member? If you're not in workforce, how does that impact?
How does it apply?
Yeah, how does it apply?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I can make anything about workforce development. I've said that my whole career is anything's about workforce development because without a job, there's not a lot left there unless you're an independently wealthy person and you're just going to college for the heck of it. Right. Most everybody's going to land in a job at some point after either their 2-year or their 4-year or 6 years, as my niece is, I think, on her 6th or 7th. She's getting her PhD, though. So, okay. But that, to me, is the job is the end result. And so how do we think about that journey with that job? We've had the conversation with faculty, and I was an acting dean at one point because my dean left, and so, acting in the community college system went for 3 years. So I worked with the faculty quite a bit, and really, with the faculty, really thought through how do we have real-life examples of the work relationship with what they're learning in the classroom. Right. And then also thinking about work-based learning, really looking at dual enrollments also with the high schools, and I know you guys are doing a lot of work on that as well. but it's like, how do you take that lifelong journey with the students so that our system, I always say we're, adult programs, our youth programs, and our dislocated worker programs are really kind of an offshoot of a missed opportunity, I think, for education of students who just didn't do well in either high school or college. And so they didn't go the pathway that we've all had the opportunity to go. And so how do we get them back into school? But we also have to relate to that what their needs are going to be, which is also being employed part of the time. They're going to have childcare potential issues, and they're going to need that support and that wraparound services. So I just think from the heart of like my faculty when I worked with them is just remembering, and they know this, is how important that person's life is, and just how there's a lot of tragedies in there, as we have all had tragedies in one way or another. But with the folks that we work with, there's just a lot of challenges that they've been faced with, and how do we best serve them?
Right. And I know we talked a little bit about last night about our economy and how community colleges really play an important role in that. We train the vast majority of our nurses and our first responders. And could you maybe talk about some of the exciting initiatives that you're looking forward to in the next couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, part of the billions that the governor has put in place, a good portion of that's for healthcare. About 1.4 of 1.5 billion is in actually the healthcare systems. Obviously, we learned with COVID there was a lot of capacity need, there was a lot of retirees, there was a lot of burnout. And we continue to have like stressors, as we all know, with hospitals closures and things like that, especially in this area, in this region. And so working with the Health and Human Services Agency, Dr. Galley and his administration with ours, to really put together how we put dollars out to actually have meaningful impact. And it was actually a really good conversation last night, because some of the things that we think are happening at the state level, at the local level, are actually not happening at the local level that we think. So it's always helpful to have that two-way conversation. But a good portion of the funds actually come out through the Health and Human Services Agency side, but we are the ones that direct the actual implementation of that. And so I can see the community colleges, as we all know, will play a critical role in those funding opportunities. We just put out we're putting out $30 million of $130 million to the adult side of the community college, really for English language learners, but it's also to get people that have into career pathways for healthcare, but it's also people that may have come to this country that have had experience in the healthcare sector, and how do you move them with some prior learning experience into a much faster model. So those are some just ideas we're thinking about.
Well, thank you. And I know we're all interested in prior learning and credit for prior learning, and there's a lot to work out. The state really hasn't figured out how they're going to fund that. I think everybody's like, that makes sense, but how does it work? I know you've had some conversations. Do you see that getting resolved anytime soon about how we might be able to do it? Because everybody around the room says, well, that makes sense, but how will it work?
How do we fund it? Yeah. I think I met with Dr. Christian yesterday. I had the opportunity in the morning. I came down here last night and had dinner, and yesterday morning I spent the good morning and the night before with Dr. Christian. I feel like I work more for the community colleges than I do the labor agency at this point, but that is a key component of what we're trying to figure out. The funding, I think, for now, we can probably do a lot through grants and other opportunities so that you would still have your maintenance of your current funding streams, but I do think it is important for us to think about how we would pilot some of those projects quick. I think the ag tech opportunity is a really good one for this area. I think some healthcare opportunities for here as well, using some of our money, so we could have some offsets potentially to do the work early. But I think there will have to be some legislative changes, and that's one of the things obviously we do in our world is, and I talked to the new chancellor this week about, the chancellor's office has been pretty active around legislative, but they usually are pretty also silent around legislation for the most part. And I think you'll see a change, I think, in a good way, of the way that our administration, with the governor's support, will look at ways that we can better do this with some legislative changes.
Well, that's wonderful, because I know here in our valley we have two things that we really care about, and that's healthcare. With the closure of Madera Hospital, it has been horrible for our community. It's been bad for our students. It's bad for everyone. And we also know that we want to take care of our farm worker population as we continue to feed the world. So later today, you'll be hearing some information about an amazing survey of our farm workers that I think will change the way we think about how we work with that population to help them reach their goals. And I know that data was kind of interested to you as well, because you do look at data quite a bit to make decisions, right?
We do, all day long. So we also oversee Labor Market Information Division. We work really closely with the Centers of Excellence and actually provide most of the data that actually the Centers of Excellence do a much better job of explaining than we do. But we're data-driven. The governor is very data-driven, and ag is key to my heart. So I come from an ag background. I come from the North State. My mother's a cattle rancher. My partner's mother runs a rice ranch. So that is the heart of, I think, what we do in our economy for California. And so how do we better support our ag community? How do we better support the workers within the ag community? But also looking at the children of the ag workers, too. That was the other component that I think is, if there's other opportunities outside of ag, and I know I get beat up on this a little bit once in a while, but as ag transitions to more an automated workforce, or mechanization of the workforce, you're going to see less and less jobs potentially within that industry anyway. What is our opportunities to start working with those students early, quickly, and move them into healthcare, into other job opportunities within our local economies? So those are just some thoughts around how important that is to us and how we're going to also have additional resources for ag and healthcare coming up.
Well, I think that's great. I know a number of our faculty have been involved in the Ag Tech project, and we're going to hear more about that today. And I got the 5-minute warning from off the side. So I wanted to ask you two questions, if I could get to. One, I'll ask, of all the initiatives, you talked about a $2 billion budget from the governor. What is the newest thing that is kind of exciting for you? And you're thinking, this is really innovative. This is something that we can help, as with colleges, can help you with that goal.
So it's probably, which the governor hates the name, so we're changing it, but it's the SURF program, the Community Economic Resilience Funds. I actually helped write the legislation for the governor. He wanted to do something big and bold. It's $600 million. It goes to 13 regions in the state of California. It links economic and workforce development together. I think the community colleges are key for this. I think the colleges hold such a critical role for our local economies. Whether it's just even thinking about the payroll that we generate from a community college system, but also thinking about how you can better use solar energy, not just about the training of solar energy, but what can your community colleges play a role for that as hubs too? Really thinking about how your community colleges play just not the workforce development role, but the economic development role within your communities. You're doing it today. You're bringing all these people to in the middle of Fresno and going to spend money. That's economic development, right? But that is probably one of our biggest programs that the governor is most excited about. And how do we make sure that these 13 regions, we get it right? We have about 3 years left in the administration. We want to hand off to the next administration a blueprint for the state of California to better do economic and workforce development. I really want the colleges to be the center of that. I think that's important.
I think it's important too, and I know our local SURF region here is, the convener of that is the Central Valley Foundation, which we're a proud partner of, and we've been very involved in the SURF project, so we're hopeful we'll have more voice at the table, which is always important. I'm going to end on one question that you might not be ready to answer. There's all this promise about education, and too often we've seen a lot of our private post-secondaries crash and burn. For example, Heald College, remember them? They closed, and then they came to our colleges to be able to finish what they started at a private post-secondary. And of course, ITT, remember when they closed? And they came, and we tried to help them as well. While not in college, here locally, we had this company called Bitwise, and it stranded employees, which we're trying to hire some of them, but it also stranded some apprentices. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, awful scenario for this area, and actually a good part for the state of California. So, the state, we have what we call rapid response funds. It's to help with dislocations, and I really appreciate the community college stepping up to actually look at what's the opportunity for the apprentices. Apprentices is a massive undertaking that we've taken on for the governor as well, with the 500,000 promised by 2029. We had funds actually allocated to go to Bitwise. Luckily, we didn't allocate them before they filed bankruptcy, and so we've held the funds. But with between the rapid response funds, so I think right now we have applications for almost $3 million, approximately, working with your administration, with the chancellor here, and also working with our local workforce board. So we're looking at those applications now. we will be funding a good portion of those applications very shortly to be able to ramp back up that apprenticeship training program, working with your community college to do so.
Can you say that one more time? So I want to make sure they heard that.
There'll be money available for apprenticeship training programs for your community college, yes.
So our colleges, once again, are not going to let people be stranded.
Yes, exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Stewart Knox a round of applause. He's one of us.